Thank you very much, Arzu. Thank you to the Middle East Center. Quickly like to thank a number of people at the University of Washington who really helped me. My dissertation committee, Joel Migdal, Arbella Vechlimon, Christian Kotorix, and Vicente Rafael. I would really like to thank the Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Lund University, who was very gracious to take me in for about 5 to 6 months as a visiting scholar. So without further ado, I want to dedicate this talk to the victims of ISIS, but especially the Yazidi women who really suffered so much, as we've seen. And their suffering has not gone unnoticed, and their resilience is a real inspiration to me, and I'm sure many of you. So in my talk, I'm not going to focus on a lot of the most brutal aspects of what ISIS has done, but a lot of the more banal ones. And in doing so, I don't want to normalize or recognize them as a legitimate government, but hopefully add to our collective knowledge. So here in the beginning, I've put in what is coming together as a coherent timeline of ISIS history from about 1999. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I'm happy to go through it in the question and answer if any of you have questions about this specifically. What I can say shortly is that Abu Musab al-Zarqawi is really the man at the center of this group when it starts in about 1999. And we can trace this group now. We have enough empirical knowledge to know, how it grows, how it moves, that goes eventually, obviously the 2003 invasion of Iraq is a huge part when his group goes there and begins fighting American forces. There's a number of high-profile attacks that we previously didn't know were carried out by, or maybe people inside intelligence agencies knew, but I don't think the public really realized were the beginnings of ISIS. And some of those in Baghdad, in Najaf, the suicide bombings in Amman in 2005, all of these were beginnings of ISIS. And I also traced through here their changes in leadership and name, because they changed their name multiple times. And also the fact that in late 2011, they start Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria, and later a split happens between these two groups. They fall out with each other, and they become two distinct groups. That is something we understand more clearly now. And so I can go through more of this at the end if people have specific questions. And so I draw this all the way up until June 2014, when ISIS seizes Mosul. So I think my kind of addition here is a longer term argument in terms of how things have changed since World War II, basically leading up to ISIS. And I've laid these out in a different talk that I've given at Lund University. You can find the video of it on my blog. So the 5 main points, I see a huge change in Islamic thought supporting jihad over the 20th century. That I begin with Hassan al-Banna and Sayyid Qutb, and over several decades eventually reaches Abu Musab al-Zarqawi and now ISIS. But that these men, their views changed significantly, and al-Banna would not be in agreement ideologically with the men who run ISIS today. Okay. So that's a huge change. The second one is that in the Arab Middle East more broadly, Arab nationalism collapses and leaves a huge kind of hole in the political sphere that isn't immediately filled, and it's slowly filled by political Islam. Without that happening first, it's really hard to see ISIS existing as it does today. In a broader global economic context, the collapse of the dollar-gold standard significantly changes the global economy and causes commodity prices to rise significantly, especially oil prices, right? And that's exacerbated by geopolitical uncertainty. The 1973 war between Israel and multiple Arab states, the OPEC blockade in response to that war, as well as the Islamic Revolution in Iran later in 1979. All these factors significantly push oil prices up, and they provide a financial backing for what I'm going to talk about in the next point, the various regimes in the Middle East, especially the various kings and dictators that have been the bedrock for U.S. foreign policy, the vast majority of them supported and stabilized by U.S. foreign policy. And then the jihadists loathed these people. They have a specific term for them. They call them taghut, which is like a tyrant. And so men like Bashar al-Assad, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, the King of Jordan, etc. Right? And finally, after the end of the Cold War, there's the whole kind of end of history idea that after 9/11 takes a more concrete turn in the Middle East that leads to the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq. And I see this, that I think with more distance, we're going to see this as a form of liberal hubris that, this kind of force could be used to reshape an entire region, and not only that it could, but that it should be done. Right? Okay. So I've laid out a number of maps here, and I've dated them. Clearly, there's a whole bunch more change, but you can see, starting in the top left, right around the time that ISIS first seizes Mosul, and moving down to the bottom right, what it looks like most recently in the middle of October. And what I think is important to take away from this is that this is not a solid, coherent state that you see on a map. It's a jumbled mess, where major cities are controlled as well as a lot of important roads connected, right? But that it has not coalesced into something more. It still really resembles something like a spider web. And in the details, you can really see the way some of these different branches extend and are cut off at different times, and then they have to fight vehemently just to reconnect them so that people and goods can move once again through the areas that they thought they had established of the caliphate. And most important to note on this map is up at the top in the Turkish border. This is the area, this is really ISIS's lifeline to the outside world. So much of what they depend on in terms of material, and especially fighters, is coming from mostly the northwest up there by where it says Ain al-Arab in the bottom, my pointer won't look at it, but in the bottom left, and moving south and east. So this is something they have to fight especially vehemently for to keep this flow going. And so my talk is going to hinge around these four basic things: movement and circulation, as you've already seen I'm talking about with the maps. I look at various forms of punishment, and I'm especially interested in the kind of bottom level things. How do they punish low level offenses? There's some different aspects of their economy I'm going to talk about, as well as how they respond to technology. Okay. So the first thing that ISIS does after it seizes Mosul is it puts in a program of repentance. And anyone, the document on the right